Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I have a, I'm going to introduce our panel, but first I just want to say a little bit about the themes which they're going to discuss. So as Paul said, the NCAT have already undertaken some initial research work, which really was looking at exploring and sort of making sense of and structuring our understanding of what some of the barriers are, both in terms of accessibility of transport practically, in terms of what is and isn't working, but also looking to understand what are the systemic issues that are preventing change, particularly given what I think we can all agree is that there are some changes which don't feel like they should be that difficult, but are not happening. So the work that NCAT have been doing today with the CAT panel others is to understand and really to sort of bring together that wealth of existing knowledge and expertise, the lived experience of the individuals that they've spoken to produce a sort of overview of those barriers. And that's a really important part of the role of NCAT as an evidence centre, is to make that knowledge and that understanding accessible, and also to make that plain and to hold that up to those in power who can act on it. The 4 themes that we're going to discuss today, and these are not the only themes, but they are the 4 that we've decided to prioritise for today. Each of our speakers are going to speak a little to those, and I hope that they will, to some extent, be familiar to you, while not being too disheartening, because the bulk of the day really is focused on what do we do to address these themes and where are the opportunities. So we're going to hear from Catherine, who's going to talk to us about the lack of involvement of disabled people in design, in strategy, in policy. We're going to hear from Simone, who's going to speak to us about accountability, about why this lack of responsibility from transport organisations for hitting commitments or targets, what that lack of accountability is doing. We're going to hear from Deborah, who's going to speak about the physical barriers in the street, about that kind of first step of transport. You know, if we can't access the transport systems that exist because our streetscapes don't work, I'm going to hear a little bit about that initial barrier. And then we're going to hear from Anna about interactions with other people. Anna's going to speak a little bit about some of the barriers that disabled people face when travelling because of how the public and staff in transport systems think and behave. What's happening when those situations are where there's a lack of assistance, or more problematically, where there's harassment or prejudice. How that affects the ability of people to travel, both practically and to feel confident travelling. So those are our 4 themes that we're going to hear about and the themes that we're going to discuss today. I'm going to hand over to, before we move to Michael, who's the other person on the stage, he's going to then start speaking about some of the options for addressing these. So I'm going to start with you, Catherine. I'm going to hand over to you. So Catherine, I'll introduce you very briefly. Catherine is a traffic signals design engineer, so an actual doer of things, transport things. And Catherine is going to speak to us, as I said, about this first challenge of not involving disabled people.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, as they say, I'm a traffic signal engineer and I work for Amy in Sheffield. As you can see, I'm an amputee. I lost my left leg to an osteosarcoma or bone cancer when I was 7 years old. And I first came across an accessibility travel issue when I was about 8. When my mum and dad decided to buy me a scooter for Christmas. One leg and scooters don't mix. And after that, I thought to myself, I need to change this. This needs to evolve. So I put stabilizers on it. I did all sorts so that I was able to use it. And that was my first real inclination that I needed to change how accessibility works. As I've got older, and I studied to be an engineer, I want to change the way that we all, as a disabled person, I wanted to change the way that I walked and worked in and around environments and in the civil sector. So, as in my line of work, I now look at every design individually as a disabled person. I make sure that that's right. I make sure that pavements are accessible, make sure that they are wider for people to use. And to be honest, in my life, whenever I've been on public transport, I'm ignored. And that's the biggest barrier for me. I'm ignored completely. I've been on the train this morning, and in Chesterfield Station, I asked someone to help me, and they completely ignored me and blanked me. And said, oh no, you can manage. But clearly I can't, because I need someone to carry my bag. I need someone to help me to my seat. Oh, well, we can't deal with someone like you. It's like, in this day and age, you can't deal with someone like me. I've only got one leg. It's not, I haven't got 3 heads. One leg, bit missing, that's it. Oh no, we can't deal with you. And yet when I got to St Pancras, it got a little bit better. And then it got really good when I got to the next station to come here. And then I had all the help I could get. So I'm not quite sure where the cut-off point was and where we need to be putting these policies, but we really need to be embedding these policies in the start of the journey. Go to the little towns, educate the little towns, because London's a big place. It's the little places that are not hearing the voices. That's where we need to start, because we are getting ignored, and we don't need to be ignored. Yeah, think that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. That's really helpful. And thank you. One thing that I might just ask our speakers is for the benefit of attendees with visual impairments, if you would be happy to provide any kind of description as you're introducing yourselves. That's a nice way to introduce ourselves.
Okay. Who's next?
Simone, you are next. I'm going to hand over to you, and you're going to speak about accountability.
I forgot I need that. That's working.
The microphone, yes, that would be.
And I'm not going on social media. I have got notes on my phone. I just thought I'd better say, if you thought I was distracted. So I'm Simone West. I'm in Principal Inclusive Designer at TfL. And I might speak a bit more about that because that's a new role at TfL. I've been at TfL 5 years. And in January, and actually when I went there 5 years ago, that was a new role. I was Inclusive Design Advisor. And we've created a new role that is embedded into engineering, which is actually one of the things I'm going to talk to you about. So just to describe me, for anybody who can't see me, I'm an older lady. I don't know when you go past middle-aged, I'm not sure, but I am now, have to face the fact that I'm a bit older. I've got grey blonde hair and glasses. I've probably got an over-optimistic dress on, a bit summery. I realised this morning I probably need to change that. You don't need to know this. I'll stop waffling. Anyway, the title and subtitle. So I'm looking at theme 2, which is no accountability. And the subheading of that is organisations are not being held responsible for making sure transport is accessible. Firstly, I want to say, yes, absolutely. Why haven't we come further? I think that's a given. I do want to say, however, that I need standards, I need legislation, I need it to do my job, because actually I have examples of where the only reason I've really been heard, and actually part of the only reason I have a job, is because there is some accountability, because they have to have someone. I don't think they necessarily always put them in the right places or have the right people, but when I step up and use the Equality Act, I get listened to where occasionally perhaps I wouldn't have done previously, and the same went for Disability Discrimination Act. So, accountability is really important for the people trying to work in the inclusive design field, to have that. Now, I also think it's incredibly complicated. We all know the transport network is made up of all kinds of different aspects to create an inclusive environment. So we have marketing working on campaigns to try and change behaviour. We have the built environment teams, we have customer experience and those receiving you and the training that goes on. The list is kind of endless, and it can fall down on any of those points. So I wanted to pick out one point because I don't have an awfully long time, and I am, you might have guessed, prone to waffling. So there was a piece in the information that I was sent under this theme, and I'm just going to read that for you. People working in transport design said that guidance to help them make transport accessible was difficult to understand. They said it wasn't part of the way they normally work, so they didn't always use it, and they weren't encouraged or made to do so. Now, for me, that plays completely into my hands because I'm not surprised by that. It was a head in hands moment. It's not that hard, honestly. I think what it highlights for me is that there is lots of guidance, there's lots of standards. You have to be able to interpret it, you have to understand it. You need to be able to understand the legislation, you need to have the input and the understanding and, you know, with different stakeholders to make that relevant. And I do find that a lot of designers leave bits out because they don't know why it's there. They don't know why the shelf is needed for stone management. They don't, it's not that important, it's just a bit of wood in the corner. So there's 101 things that get left off because people don't understand. And then, as was said in that quote, they also just leave it out because no one's pushing them to do so. What I'm advocating is that we actually embed people whose job it is to be accountable for inclusion. We don't automatically have that. I mean, obviously I work on lots of projects, but I don't work across all of them. It's a bit hit and miss. And we need to have that embedded like we would. You'd have a mechanical engineer, you'd have an electrical engineer. You know, I mean, I couldn't cover those jobs. So why is it assumed that someone can cover inclusion? They just tack it onto their job and they know all about it without a great deal of experience, training, talking to people. And it gets left behind because no one's picking it up. You need the thread, and I'm for those of you who work in projects, you'll know what I mean, but for those of you that don't, you know, you have an idea at the beginning and you have a product at the end. I'm talking about built environment specifically here. And there are points along that whole journey that can fail. I can give you examples. Have I got time for a couple of examples?
Maybe one.
One, just one. Okay, I have quite a few. Along the journey, it can fail. I'll give you one example. London 2012 Games, brilliant experience for me because I actually got to work from beginning to end, not just called in for one meeting, tell us what you want, go away again. So I actually got to see the failures along that whole line. Procurement was one of the failures where they didn't actually ask anyone why stuff was in there, and they made massive savings on the porta cabins that we got, and we then had to, at great expense, put all of that back in after procurement stripped them out and got a great deal. And of course it cost way more, it cost the organisation, LOCOG, way more to put those in when they were on a specific now schedule of rates from a tenderer. Big mistake. There were mistakes, I won't go in detail, I promise, but there were mistakes through the whole process. There were mistakes on site that were quite surprising. And that's the thing. You think it's all designed, and then someone goes and puts the wash hand basin in a different place, or they don't get the gradient of the ramp right. You need eyes on through the whole of the project. Shut myself out of my media. So, moving on to the question of what can NCAT do? Well, I mean, the list is probably endless. You know, we do need training and upskilling, and so whilst I think we need expertise, and I use that term loosely, we are all only experts in our own experience, but, you know, someone who can help pull that together and communicate that and express that need. We also need a general upskilling so that people are better able just to do their job and understand the relevance of inclusion to them. Research gaps, there's never enough research. We're always behind. Anytime a standard is written, it's out of date. Of course, we always need more research about the gaps. Improving effectiveness of stakeholder engagement, that's not new. We talk about stakeholder engagement and involvement and co-design, and we talk about it, and we talk about it, and we talk about it. We still haven't got it right. I really want to know where we're falling down on that. Why is it not being implemented well? Focus on lessons learned. We don't do enough of that. Embed into projects. That's my really big ask. Embed it as a recognised thing that needs to be a whole thread. Great case studies would be really good to show people and demonstrate, and better ways to challenge delivery. A bit of carrot and stick. I don't think we can fix it just by the stick. I think we need to help people embed it into these processes.
Thank you very much, Simone. That's really helpful. And thank you for your honesty there also in sharing what's gone well as what's gone wrong. And I hope you can start to see some connections between this in terms of Catherine's experiences in particular transport settings and then the systems behind that lead that to be possible. I'd like to hand over to Deborah now, if I can. And if you could, thank you, Catherine, just pass that microphone over. Deborah is going to speak to our third theme, which is around barriers in the street. And she's going to speak to the barriers that disabled people experience getting around because of things on the street, poorly designed pavements. Deborah, if you want to introduce yourself and just say a little bit about that.
Thank you. I'm Deborah Bassard. I am one of the independent board members at NCAT, but I'm also the chair of Transport for All, which is the UK's only disabled-led organisation seeking transport justice for disabled people. This is the lovely Betty, who is my guide dog, who is just being very distracting today.
For those who may not be able to see, she's eating shoelaces.
I'm a brown middle-aged woman, older middle-aged woman, I'm with you on that one. And I've got long dark hair. I thought it was a dress-up theme party today, so I've come as a zebra crossing. I've got a black and white T-shirt on, and Betty's wearing her lovely high-vis, and she's going to upstage everybody today by chewing my shoelaces. So I feel like I'm just doing a bit of show and tell on some of the things that colleagues have already been talking about today. So I went out for a quick walk a few minutes from my house, and I've got some pictures to show you, which I will describe, which just show us every day how challenging it is to get around. So the first one we've got is the zebra crossing to nowhere. So we've got, well, actually it's a zebra crossing from hell, because there's a tactile paving which leads you onto the zebra crossing, which then leads you to some tactile paving which leads you into the middle of the cycle path. And if you try and cross that cycle path, you then end up in a hedge. So the pavement is beyond that. So I'm not sure who designed that or implemented it, but that's a fun one. The next one I've got for you, and Catherine, I'm really sorry about this, is some temporary traffic light signals. And they're randomly placed on a tactile paving where the normal Pelican crossing is. If you try and use them, you're a blind person. Sorry, I'm sure everybody's recognised that I'm a blind person. You get your hand shredded because there's nice metal sharp things that stick out right where the button is. If you can't see them, then that's goodbye to your hand. The third one I've got is this real doozy. I don't know who designed this one. It's a new design where the tactile paving is inside the building line. So Betty got into that picture because when Betty's standing, where she's trained to stand, behind the tactile paving, she can't see around the corner, she can't be seen. There's a matching one on the other side. It's a flat pavement when you walk out, there's no curb. So actually, you don't know this, but when we stepped out to cross over, we nearly got hit by a quiet car that's an electric car. So we didn't capture that bit, but that's really interesting. I don't know who designed that one. And then I think the next one, I think there's lots and lots of points that you can score on this one. It's complete humdinger because, sorry, Catherine, you walk across the pedestrian crossing, and if you hit the tactile, you then walk into a nice fixed cycle stand that's been put there for somebody's part of their bike, so I've fallen over that a number of times. You're then onto a big wide flat pavement which also doubles up as a cycle path and some dockless bike parking, and I think you get a bonus point if you can see the very fine upstanding young man on the line bike who is herring across the pavement with and very helpfully giving his friend a lift. So all of those things are things that we encounter because of poor design. So I wanted to talk to you about what this the thing I should say is that this is all very urban, and if I didn't live in central London, which has its pros and cons, if I lived in the middle of the countryside, I'd have no pavement, no safe crossing points, no tactile paving, no lighting, and so on. So it's a completely different experience, depending on where you are, but not great for anybody. So what does this tell us about how those features were implemented and how the decisions were made? Well, I can tell you now, without having any insight into how what happened on the ground, that no disabled person was involved in designing any of that or implementing it. I think I'd really like to see the quality impact assessments on those schemes. Did a disabled person sign those off? They might have been paid a fiver to turn up to a consultation group, but nobody would have signed those off. And I imagine that there are multiple agencies involved in, and lots of people in the supply chain involved in implementing those schemes. As Simone said, retrofitting to fix some of these problems after everybody's walked off the job is quite expensive, and no amount of telling people that these things don't work is helping. So the impact that it has on me and people who are disabled, well, firstly, it's impossible to enforce the law. So if I'd walked across that crossing, got hit by those lads on their line bikes, are they on the pavement? Are they on the cycle path? You can't enforce some of those traffic laws. Talking to people who are implementing these schemes, and there are a lot of them going on across London at the moment, and probably elsewhere, about low traffic neighbourhoods and little neighbourhoods and those sorts of active travel schemes. No amount of trying to get through to the right people is having any impact. It's tricky. It's getting to the point where I can't go out without somebody with me, which is a complete loss of independence. So, whether the tactile pavement behind the building line is, that's on my way to the shops to buy some bread, and it's going to stop me from doing that. So, disabled people can't get out and about. We can't be part of the economy, is what Cameron was saying earlier. If we are excluding disabled people from just going about our daily lives, we can't get to work, we can't go to the shops, we can't go out and spend money in the nighttime economy. We can't do any of those things, and it's just a really horrible, vicious circle. So those are a few of the impacts that has, and it just knocks people's confidence. It's really dispiriting, and it's exhausting as well. So I think what we want to talk about is co-design, and you're all lovely people here, but you're not representative of the industry, and it's got to change, as Simone was saying, to a point where disabled people aren't just paid their voucher to turn up for a focus group. Disabled people have got to be at the heart of all of this. So bringing people into the industry, giving disabled people careers where they are those decision makers and they are the designers and people that are signing off on those procurements and spotting those problems. So, it's not hard. And I think that's the change that I'd like to see. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Okay. Thank you. And that theme really came through, I think, very strongly in the research that NCAT have done to date, that while there are challenges across all modes of transport, there was almost a universal experience of this lack of access, just getting to any mode of transport. So a sense of that being a kind of almost a failure at the first hurdle, which I think is really important. And again, your kind of points around how the lack of involvement in that decision making speaks to Catherine's point, the lack of accountability. If it goes wrong, what does happen in that situation? Those things are all connected. Last but not least, I'm going to hand over to Anna, who's going to speak to our fourth theme, which is about interactions with other people, which is the sort of other key component of this. And Anna, if you'd like to just introduce yourself and speak a little bit to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm a qualitative researcher and disability campaigner. I'm currently doing my PhD just across the Olympic Park at UCL at the Global Disability Innovation Hub. And a lot of my research work and activism work centers around something I call the implementation gap, which is the fact that we have a lot of laws and standards and regulation that are good in theory, but they don't quite reach to disabled people in practice. And the theme I'm going to talk about today is about interactions with other people and attitudes, and the way where someone's attitude on the day can prevent you from traveling regardless of the fact that you might have the right to. I'm on the governance board of the NCAT. I'm one of the independent members, and I was brought on particularly due to my expertise in research and also in emergencies and what happens when there's a disaster, when something doesn't work, when you have to evacuate, and how can we build that into transport. And as well as thinking about intersectionality. I think I brought up in my original application how oftentimes I feel like I have to choose between accessibility for me as a disabled person and my safety on transport as a woman, and how that's something that isn't always quite thought through from the many different angles that it should be. I liked how Cameron mentioned Judy Heumann in his opening remarks. I used to work with Judy back in Washington, D.C., where I used to live, and we once asked her what her favorite city in the world was, because Judy Heumann had traveled everywhere with the U.S. government on disability rights, and she said that her favorite city in the world was London, because it was the only place where she could just hop in a cab and go anywhere. London is the only place where every taxi is, in theory, accessible. And I think that's important to note, both to show how we're in a place where we have so much privilege and progress, but there's also quite a long way to go. And kind of Tanni Grey Thompson, who I think has also been mentioned a bit in this sphere lately, always says that we're not asking for anything special as disabled people. We just want the same shit experience of transport that everyone else has, and that would really be enough. So this theme, just to say the name again, is interactions with other people. Disabled people face barriers when traveling because of how the public and staff think and behave. And I was asked to talk a bit about how this has been reflected in my own experience of transport. And what first came to mind is how oftentimes staff can't seem to wrap their head around the fact that disabled people have places to be, and with some sort of urgency, ideally. Once I was on a train that had gotten paused because someone on it was having a medical emergency, so it was going to stay at this station for about an hour while an ambulance came, and so everyone on the train was getting off onto the platform to swap to another train that was going to leave more quickly. And so I said, yes, I'd also like to get off the train. And I was greeted with the question by the staff member, "Oh, did you have somewhere to be?" No, I'm just taking the train up and down the country for fun. And the same thing, I think, happens on the tube and on. And the reason today I took a taxi in is because when I do take the train in, I usually get the high speed for the last leg over to here from St. Pancras to Stratford International. And if I arrive even, with 10 minutes for the train, and the ramp is right next to the train door on that platform, so you can really get it ready quickly, they always make me wait for the next one after that, as if there's, I could not possibly have anywhere to be. So it really matters to us, and I think there's a lot of other ways, including that people have already mentioned up here, that just mere attitudes can prevent us from traveling. And in terms of NCAT's findings, I'm going to read a quote from one of our CAT panel members. "The staff, they may not see you as a passenger. They may actually see you as baggage, something they have to get on and off the train quickly so you don't disturb other passengers. They shouldn't see us as that. They should see us as people, human beings." And the way that we found this, and many other things about attitudes, was by asking our 1,195 disabled people on the CAT panel about these barriers. attitudes really, really came to the forefront as one of those issues. And finally, as to what I'd like to see the NCAT do about this, I think, our role is as a research center. So I think we need to keep that front and center, that our role is research. But research can mean many things, and there are a lot of really creative ways to do it. And I think where we need to sit is not in just researching the problems, although that's important, because although disabled people, we know what the problems are because we live them every day. We often need methodologically sound statistics and findings in order to prove that to the powers that be. But not just researching the problems, we need to research what works and the solutions and innovations, and we need to test things. And that's what I'd really like to see over our next few years on the NCAT, because we really do know what the problems are. And it gets frustrating when people tell you what they are, and you say, yeah, I know, I couldn't get the train yesterday because of that. So I think we need to be testing solutions, and I'd really like to hear from people today about how you think that should happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Okay, that is a perfect transition to Michael, who is going to speak exactly to this point around what are these solutions that could be tested, what is the process by which NCAT is going to start moving from this identification of problems and barriers into this space of looking at solutions. Michael, I'll just hand straight over to you. Introduce yourself and yeah.
Absolutely. Morning, everyone. I think I'm the last speaker before break.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Michael Edwards. I'll just describe myself. I am a black man. I have a very large afro. Why are you laughing? I have vertigo, so I have a white patch about the size of a tennis ball over my right eye. I'm wearing my fabled white and blue stripy shirt and my new chinos, which have a wet patch on them from Betty when she said hello to me earlier, but I will carry that wet patch with pride. And I wear my blue suede shoes. In my personal life, I've been a carer for about 15 years. Firstly, for an ex-partner who had schizoaffective bipolar, probably why she chose to leave me. And then in my family's area, my dad suffered a severe stroke about 2.5 years ago, so I've been at home caring for him because he suffered quite a loss of mobility. I work for a place called Connected Places Catapult. We are essentially responsible for helping to drive the future of transport in the UK and ensuring that the UK benefits from economic growth, that we help decarbonise, but most importantly, that we help make sure the future of transport is accessible and inclusive. We wanted to talk a bit about how NCAT can help. So we've spoken quite a lot about the research that we can do and the fact that we can work with the likes of government to show how our research outputs can help inform the decisions around regulation and decisions around the future of the built environment and the transport system. We can also work with industry to help them understand decisions they make around the products and services they design and the things that they create. But what we also want to do is to actually use some of the funding that we've got to help to help people develop new products and services that sort of meet the needs of the disabled people. So not just use research to understand what can be done at a policy or practical level, but actually to get out there and set challenges that help us to understand what we can do by basically increasing the level of products and services that are available in the market to support disabled people when they're travelling. So we want to have real-world evidence, and we want to use the funding we've got to fund people and organisations to help to understand how we take the challenges we're going to talk to you today and that we created through the evidence, and ask people to tell us the products and services and the solutions they think that they can create. And we will use our funding and the support from the expertise in the centre to help people, whether it's to do some early stage research ideas or whether it's around doing sort of later stage product development and testing. So we can actually do the research, inform government, but at the same time, we can also understand how we use that research to frame challenges that we test in the real world. And hopefully that testing and that learning will create products and services that, whilst there's discussions going on within government around regulation and policy change, we can actually help get more products and services into the market to help improve the transport experience. And that's quite a unique way that we're going to use the funding from NCAT. And we'll open this competition on the 24th of October. And what it means is people will set some challenges, people will apply to those challenges with potential solutions, and we'll go through a process of selecting projects that we think should be funded, and then funding will be given, and we will work with those companies hand in hand to make sure that they are supported in those products development processes, but also to ensure that we use the expertise from the consortium partners in the centre to really sort of help everyone that's receiving our funding. And one of the stipulations that we're going to make is that every project has a disabled person or disabled representation within it, and that role is funded on the project, whether it's as an expert, an advisor. We want to make sure that in the co-development that Cameron spoke about earlier, that these projects are delivered hand in hand with the centre and with the disabled people we're trying to support, so that we can ensure that the projects that are delivered have some form of validation, and they are sort of reflective of the challenges that we are trying to address.
Thank you, Michael. That's really helpful.